Hello everyone, back in the man cave. Thought I'd take a little bit of time out and talk to you about two of the main parts of my golfing philosophy. Back in a moment. So, cheers. Nothing like a good gin and tonic after a hard day's work. Gotta love it. Not part of the two ideas in my philosophy though. If we're thinking about golf philosophy, it's probably a big word for it. But the reason I use it is because I like to think at any rate that I'm kind of doing something different to your average kind of golf lesson. My philosophy is to try and separate the technique of a golf swing from the game of golf. I think we've always said, golf is 99% between your ears. And if it is, why are we thinking about technique when we're playing? In truth, the majority of people aren't really working on the mental side of the game at all, or if they are, only in a very small proportion. And the technique is kind of pushed into the foreground, and that's all they're really thinking about. And what I try to do is get my students to kind of separate these two issues right from the start. I look at technique as ability to move. Not necessarily make a golf swing, but the ability to move different body parts, and then the ability to actually school different body parts to make repetitive movement. So because a golf swing, I think, is so complicated, what I try to do is, first of all, break the golf swing up into three pieces. And if you've watched any other of my videos, you've already know that I've got like three systems, I call them, of the golf swing. One incorporates the shoulder movement and the trunk movement, the other the legs and the hips, and the last one is your arms and hands. And then basically what I try to do is persuade my students that if they repeat these movements often enough, then they will build basically a program in their brains which will make this movement possible. So the only thing they have to do on a golf course is call it up. Now that sounds maybe a little simplistic, but I'm quite aware that that's very difficult to do. First of all, when you've been working very hard on technique, to actually forget it. And secondly, to be controlled enough in your mental processes to think solely of goals, of what should be happening with a golf ball, and of nothing else. And that is probably for me, the biggest difference between the champions and the also runs is the champions are able to stay focused under extreme pressure to the point where really they don't seem to be under the pressure that your average Joe is. And that's probably what sets them more apart than their physical ability. Maybe there's an awful lot of talent, coordinative skills and things of that ilk, but if you stand on a driving range at a tournament, they all hit a good ball. But you could almost bet on who's going to be there at the weekend and who will be contesting it on the last day. So if we know that golf is such a mental game, why do we spend so much time thinking there is a technical fix for it? And that's basically what I try to tell my students. So on one side, I'll explain to them that learning movement is a process of building synapses in the brain which control movement, coordinating basically instructions from the brain to the muscles and feedback from the muscles, a thing they call proprioception, which steers a movement. And if you repeat a movement often enough, then you will build these synapses, but it's not going to happen overnight. So if you have learned something today, don't expect to be able to use it tomorrow, because if it's a totally new movement, you're going to need 6 to 8 weeks to actually get it into your head. And if your body isn't capable of making the movement yet because you're too stiff, your muscles are too weak, then you might even need more time for the body to acquire that ability. On the other side, however, it's about calling up ability. and associating that ability with a job. Now, in the past, we've talked about kind of chipping, pitching, putting, and all these different names, and tried to put them into boxes. So if you're chipping a ball, you've got to do this, and if you're pitching a ball, you've got to do that. And a lot of times people would get quite an okay result, but then be down on themselves really because they knew they didn't do what was in the box. What I try to do is get my students to be a bit more intuitive. So rather than talking about, is this a chip or a pitch, I'll say, okay, this is 25 yards, which for Rory might be a chip and for a 70-year-old might be a pitch. And it doesn't really matter as long as the golf ball goes somewhere in the direction of the hole. So the trick there is actually for them to understand that moving a ball has more to do with what you're thinking than your ability to make the swing, strangely enough. And you'll see this even in beginners, who are swinging with wild swings and hitting it, and more studied students who are trying very hard to do everything right and aren't hitting it at all. And that's basically because their brains aren't in the right position. They've probably got a better movement than this total beginner next to them, but they're trying so hard to do everything right that they aren't able to get the club back on the ball. So what I try to teach there is for people to just stop thinking about it so much and think more about what they're trying to do. So if I were to put a putter in your hand and stand you over a short putt, I don't think there's any chance of you making a full swing. But at the same time, if I put a wedge in your hand and stand you at the side of the green, you might start to think about what you should be technically doing now to hit the ball next to the hole, or maybe not to scuff it. And it's this distrust of the technique and your technical ability which breeds this kind of inner dialogue which will plague you really for all of your golfing years if you don't get rid of it pretty early on. So the trick really is to say, okay, well, if I have this ability, this technical ability to turn my upper body, and if you look at the first system, that's all it is. I just turn the body to the right, turn the body to the left in a particular spine angle. If I held my arm straight, then it's going to move the club backwards and forward. And if I put a ball in the way, I'm going to hit that. So really all I'm thinking about is, how hard. And how hard is given to me by how far it should go. And if I think this will hit it 20 yards and it only goes 5, then I know I need a bit more by the next time. And if I work like that, basically from the target back to the movement rather from the movement to the target. See, I want to go there, I think this will do it, and it did. Great, I've learned one thing. And I try to get my students to kind of learn that way by giving them tasks, which I don't give a name to, and then making them aware that they can use a combination of movements to fulfill the task and a combination of golf clubs. And if they get the right combination in practice, they would be able to reuse that combination in a playing situation. And that's where strategy will begin, isn't it? If you know you've got this club for this distance, then that's basically knowing that's a club I could hit. And if I hit that club, then I'm only going to have so far to the flag. And then I hit another club which goes a different distance. And that is basically the game of golf. And when golf becomes really interesting is when you're trying to find the right shots to beat the course. And if you don't have those shots, then what you should be doing is going back to the driving range and finding the shot combinations, what movements and what clubs would actually make that shot possible, rather than going back and saying, okay, well, I really don't know if my right knee's doing the right thing in the backswing, and that's probably the reason I didn't play so well today. Now, I don't know if that was a bit of a kind of a long meander on. I'll probably be able to see that in post. But if it wasn't, and you liked it, and you'd like me to do this a bit more often, I do tend to get back home quite late in the evening when I'm teaching, and it's nice to kind of sit down here and be able to chill out, have a nice gin and tonic. I'm not drinking as fast as I usually do. London number 1, I do like that stuff. And if you... I've lost my train of thought now. And if you like the video, hit the like button. If you don't like the video, then hit the don't like button. Leave me a comment if there's anything you'd like me to discuss here. I know we've got the Masters coming up very shortly, and that might be something for us to talk about. Subscribe to the channel, and there's now a little bell next to the subscribe thing so that you get notifications and know when I've done something new. As ever, I've got my philosophy in a small PDF document which you can download for just 99 cents if you click up here. Great talking to you. A little bit different today. Hope you liked it, and we'll see you next time.